Okay.
Good evening. It is 7:42, and I would like to call to order the special meeting of the Norwalk Common Council on July 17th, 2023. If you will please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our nation's flag.
To the flag
Of
of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it
for which
stands,
it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty, and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda. Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Burnett,
Present.
Mr. Camacho,
Present.
Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
Ms. Najolski Eichner,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Ayers, Mr. Uvelman,
Present.
Ms. Reveluz,
here,
Ms. Young, Mr. Kaides, Ms. McMurr,
Present.
Ms. Alterman, Mr. Meek, Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Frere. Okay, Ms. Ayers, Ms. Young, Mr. Kaides, Ms. Alterman, Mr. Meek, Ms. Shanahan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And we have the co-chair of the Charter Revision Commission, Ms. Brescia. Would you please introduce
Yes.
the people from the Charter Revision Commission who are here?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Benita Watford Raleigh is with us, Carl Dickens, Tyler Fairborn, and myself, Patsy Brescia.
I think Angela just joined us.
Angela was on as well.
Oh, and Angela came in.
Angela's
Yes,
under private check.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take my camera off.
So the next item on the agenda is public participation. Do we have anybody online who is wishing to address the council?
Yes, we do. If you'd like to address the council, please raise your hand electronically now, and please leave your comments. Keep your comments to around 3 minutes and state your name and address for the record. First person we have is Diane Laricella.
Ms. Laricella, you have the floor.
Good evening, council and mayor and staff. I had the time tonight, so I thought it would be fun to for this final meeting to reiterate some of my suggestions, but the main thing is thank all of you that have participated in moving to this initiative. It's very important for our city. However, I do think that the initial charge given to the commission itself, the Charter Revision Commission, missed some important opportunities. And while in the 3-page summary, which I think was helpful, I, of course, have read most of the changes and the actual pages. It seems that there is an emphasis stating, oh, we weren't trying to change government. Well, there have been some important tweaks to our governance structure that I think were important and I hope will pass. But we also missed out on an important opportunity when it relates to Common Council, the structure, and the compensation. So I first wanted to say in the seconds remaining, that I do think for a 4-year term that until we have term limits possible, and it was very late in this process that it was admitted by Attorney Mednick that we could have a special act in order to have that in our city for any elected, but especially mayoral term. I think that unless and until we have term limits, because I'm thinking about the 14 years of the Esposito administration, I think that would make it pass, quite frankly, but I don't think it's ready for prime time. And I think if it's advanced tonight by this council, please make sure it's a separate question. I also lastly just wanted to say thank you so much for the definitions. I very much am in favor of Article 2, includes the public. In Article 3, it's a missed opportunity. Why not expand the number of council seats, especially at large, because we're a growing city. I do think eliminating treasurer and selectmen is a good thing. I will be advocating for this to pass. I do think also that I'm not sure about the transition restrictions. I want to make sure we don't have a problem with people taking, when they leave, taking files like what happened down in Florida, of course. It wouldn't happen here, but it might in the future. I do think, again, in Article 4, I think it's your number 6 on the 3-page, the size and compensation should have been discussed in much more length. I think the Common Council, in order to make sure that some of our people can run, should have expanded a way based on an ordinance on increasing the compensation. And I do think we should have more council seats in the districts, or at least at large for a city of this size. Lastly, Article 12, why no civilian police oversight commission? That was a missed opportunity. I am glad that we are adding positions, 2 seats for the police and fire each.
You're now at 3 minutes.
Okay, I will wrap up. Lastly, on the budget, number 12, I think it's so terrific that you're going to have in item B, initial joint public hearing prior to commencement of the budget process. That really makes me so happy. I think it's very important. So thank you for allowing me to speak and allowing these changes to go forward with my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manzi, is there anybody else that wishes to address the council?
If anyone else would like to address the council, please raise your hand electronically now. I do not see anyone else, Mayor Riley.
Thank you very much. So the next item is on the agenda is the business at hand. The review and action on recommendations to the Charter Revision Commission pursuant to CGS 5719. I will turn the floor over to the council president.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to everyone. So at this meeting this evening, we will look at the revisions that we have made. We started with the Charter Revision Commission providing their due diligence in terms of recommended changes to the charter, which were followed with a series of workshops by the Common Council, a total of 3 workshops covering each of the articles. And tonight we culminate with a resolution that outlines all of the proposed revisions to the current charter. We have with us our attorney, Steve Mednick, who has charted us through this exercise and has provided expertise in terms of what we need to cover, when, and specifically, more importantly, I should say, providing a level of guidance and confidence in terms of how we complete this exercise. So at this point, I will pass the baton to Attorney Mednick to continue to walk us through the resolution and next steps as it relates to the charter revision.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to pull up something that may look familiar to you because months ago we had, do you see it? It says the process. You see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, good. So what I'm not going to go through the whole PowerPoint. Believe me, we did that a long time ago. But I'm going to go through the conclusion of the PowerPoint to tell us where we are, and then I'll talk briefly about the resolution. The president asked me to give everybody a sense, including the public, of where we are in the process. So tonight is your night. You could have simply approved the report as a final report, but as the resolution shows, there still is there are a lot of typos and stuff like that that had to be fixed, structural things that many of members of the council paid attention to. Most recently over the weekend, Councilmember Camacho came in with a number of suggestions. And then there's still a few substantive issues that you would like to have the commission take a look at. So tonight is the night where you will be making those recommendations. If there were no recommendations, tonight would be the night that you'd be approving the final report, but that is not the case. So there are recommendations. And so after these recommendations are sent back to the commission is noticing a meeting for Wednesday of this week. And at that meeting, the president and whoever else the president wants to include will confer with the council, go through the resolution, and basically tell the commission what their next steps are in the process. The commission.
Excuse me, Attorney Medley. Could I kindly ask everyone to please mute your line? If you're not speaking, we're getting a little background noise. So if you're not speaking, please mute your line so we can move through this clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought those were the voices in my head talking, but thank you, though. So they will be meeting with the president and others on Wednesday. The council, at this point, we start to narrow the process down. The commission can only review those items that the council is sending back to the commission. So the commission is confined to those items, cannot address any other issues during that process. There are no new ideas, no new proposals, no matter how extraordinary any one might be. It'll have to wait for the next charter revision at that point. When we meet on Wednesday, the commission, I'm sure, will set out an agenda for a schedule to address a number of issues. I'll give you an example of one outstanding issue that's on your list, and we still have to come up with all of the voting standards for the Common Council. So one of the sessions may devote a fair amount of time to going through that issue. The hope would be that the commission will not use its 30 days, but the commission would send the report back, hopefully by August 7th, to the council. I know you have a meeting scheduled on the 8th, but the president and I have talked about the next meeting when on the charter being on the 15th. But the date is up in the air. Whenever the president and the body determine that would be the final meeting on the final report. At that point, you're confined, and this is very unusual for a legislative body, to only vote on the items before you. You can only vote up or down on the whole package or on any separate provisions. You can reject a provision within the body of the document, or you can accept all of the provisions or reject all of the provisions, but you cannot amend the document. One of the things that I do ask for is continued indulgence on erratas, especially in a project like this where we basically restructured the entire document. But at that meeting, you will vote up or down. Once you approve the charter, the same evening, you would be approving one or more questions for the ballot. So my hope would be that as the commission is working this through, and let me just make one other important point. Because there is no amendment process, we will be working very, very carefully. Patsy will be in touch with the president and any other members the president think need to be involved as we begin developing language to make sure, particularly if members of the body had specific proposals, that we're meeting those needs. If the commission agrees with them, obviously, and wants to proceed with them, we want to make sure that the legislative sponsors are comfortable with the language that is being developed, because the time for quibbling ends while it's at the commission level. So we want to make sure that we report back a package to you that you will support. But it's not too early for the president and the members of the body to start thinking about, because you know roughly what the content is. I don't think tonight, unless there's some surprises here, Mr. President, this evening, I don't think we expect any curveballs in terms of new items of substance that will change the underlying parameters of the current charter revision. So the time to start thinking about what kind of question or questions you want is probably now and during the time that the commission has it, so that we could be ready with the questions on August 15th. After August 15th, and I'll be happy to answer any questions broadly on the issue of questions if you want when I'm done. The item has to be submitted by the town clerk to the Secretary of State early September, not more than 60 days prior to the election. That's why we have to act on it in August. Within 30 days after your action on the 15th of August, we have to publish the charter. In this case, we will publish the entire charter since it's a total rewrite. There's not going to be a red line, but it will be published. We'll talk about, I'll talk to Corp Counsel and decide whether we need to publish the annotations or simply let people know that they could see the annotations online or in the city clerk, in the town clerk's office. I am going to recommend that the town clerk publish an explanatory text in your resolution on August 15th. We would authorize the town clerk to do that, and I'll explain that as well, either tonight or at another meeting. And then the referendum will be in November. So that is the process. While we're here, any questions on the remaining process? Mr. President, is that appropriate for me to ask?
Yes, it is appropriate. Thank you for asking the question. And if anyone has any questions on the process at this point, Mr. Medic can address it.
If not, I'll talk about the resolution. If I may, though, to correct the record, make a point that was raised in the public session when I was quoted as saying that we could get the power, the right to recall, or the right to term limit through special act. I think what I said is the General Assembly would have to adopt a statute. Wouldn't be a special act. It would be a general statute to give us that authority. The legislature is loath to issue special acts, and I just wanted to correct the record for that reason. But it would require an act of the legislature, but it would probably be general law, not special law. So I just wanted to clean that up. That was just bothering me a little bit since it was in the public record. I wanted to just clarify. So what I did with the recommendations, I hope that they're clear, and I did fix a few typos, is as you were going through the due diligence, as we were going through the process for the last 3 or 4 meetings, I was taking notes. If you may recall, I asked a few times, do we have consensus on that? These are mainly a lot of corrective items. And as I was doing that, we weren't obviously taking votes, but I was tracking concerns, fixing certain things based on your comments. And also, as you probably know, several members of the council were Council Member Smith, Najolski, Eichner, and Camacho, and also McMurray raised a number of comments that were sent over to me. Mainly a lot of editing comments. I didn't take anything that would be substantive, and the items that have their names on them were items that I thought were a little more substantive and not corrections or not erratic corrections, but really good edit corrections. So I want to thank all the members of the council, including I did left out Councilmember Camacho over the weekend, sent some changes in as well. I want to thank everybody for their participation and for their comments. But what I tried to do is go through the document, and if you go through the actual revised document, the numbering sequence in the resolution matches the numbers in the side in the boxes in the actual document as you walk through. So I went through sequentially, with the exception of the Camacho changes, which came over the weekend, which I put at the end, and I just it didn't make a lot of sense to integrate at this point, so I just put them at the end of the document. We had a number of changes in the definitions. where we moved language around. There was some language in the back of the document that we moved into the definition of capital budget. And, so there were a number of changes in that. Item 2 includes 15 or so modifications of the document, of the definitions. And then we go through some of the other changes that had been made based on, again, comment at the meetings, plus the editorial comments of the members that provided information to me. So those are mainly included in the document so that the commission will be able to see the actual language changes that have been proposed. If they're not accepted, obviously, they'll clean the language up. And when you get this back, you will actually, I'll prepare a comparative document to show you what the commission accepted and what the commission did not accept. The only major substantive comment, I believe, and the members could correct me if I'm wrong, is item number 21, or 22, rather. Well, 21 is the voting standards. Remember, that's a very important thing that we have to go through and resolve. But 22 is the issue that was raised this evening by the speaker dealing with terms of office. And I think that if somebody on the floor wanted to clarify, this is the term of office for mayor and council. I realized as I was looking at it that I did not put the word mayor and council in the resolution. That's an issue I imagine the commission, if it's in your list, will take a look at and make final determination as to whether it should remain or whether it should be modified. However, but the way it was framed, it was raised by Council Member Smith. It allows them to broadly look at the issue, and I'm sure there will be dialogue between the commission and the council during this next phase. I always put in the resolutions continued Scrivener's corrections, so everybody who is reading this document, send your cards and letters in case we have missed them. It's amazing how you still pick up something here and there. Item number 24 are almost 2 alphabets full of minor Scrivener's or errata corrections. Again, none of them are major. I think the distinguishing element between the ones that have individual numbers is there is some element of substance involved in them. Again, not much more, but some. And then we get to item 25, and these are the ones that came in over the weekend. And what I did, I took the liberty of adding them into the resolution because I thought it was appropriate. And so when you get to the floor, I won't raise the issues. I'll let Councilmember Camacho raise the issues. The only thing I will say, and you can send all of these items over to the commission, is the only point I wanted to make on minority party representation. I think you've heard me say, I know the commission has heard me say, that the minority party representation law is a misnomer. It is not the right name for the law. It's really a cap on majority representation. And I think what Councilmember Camacho was getting at was that precise issue, is that it deals with party representation, but a cap on party representation. And I don't want to get into a debate, and you can send it over. The only concern I'd have about changing it is the name of the statute that governs the section. And so that would be my only caveat or comment on that, but we could deal with that. And I'll be happy to talk to Councilmember Camacho if this goes over to the commission, and we could discuss it at that point as well. But I just wanted one minor point, not in any opposition to it. I just wanted to clarify it as to my understanding of the statute. And I agree with him. The statute name is not the right name. It should be changed at the state level, to be honest with you. The last item I will talk about briefly is the item at the very end, additional issues to discuss. Those of you who were here earlier heard me discuss this with Council Member Nizelsky Eichner, and I think and I left it there just in case you wanted to kick it into the document. And if you still do, that's fine. But I was under the impression from the conversation that it's okay if we do not consider this in the document. If we need to make, she's nodding her head in the affirmative. So we can just pass over that item. So that's the brief summary. I didn't want to go through every one. I'm not sure you do too. The idea of drawing up the resolution was to have a pretty comprehensive document in front of you. Councilmember Camacho might want to go over his proposals, and maybe the other members that have their names in here, if they think that they need to. I think most everything is relatively clear, or the references are clear at the least. And I will allow you to get on with your business unless there are any other questions, Mr. President.
I guess it would be appropriate at this time for any council members that wish to make any commentary on the resolution items. As Attorney Megnick pointed out, to raise your hand to share your comments at this time. Councilmember Barbara Smith.
Thank you, President Burnett. I'd first like to take a few moments. I know we've done this many times throughout this process, but I really want to extend my gratitude to the Charter Revision Commission, Patsy, to your leadership, Steve, to your help and leadership guiding us through this. What you've done has been incredible, and I'm really grateful for the work. Also, other council members who have contributed, Nora, particularly you, you just have done such incredible work, and just thank you for your attention to all the detail, for your editing. Also, thanks for that attention to the Oxford comma. I'm a big supporter of it, so I'd like to see that. I want to ask a few questions about the 4-year term and just have a brief discussion about that, because, some of us have talked amongst ourselves and have felt pretty strongly that, a 4-year term for the mayor without a 4-year term for the council could really be problematic. And I had a great conversation with Steve over the weekend that had me thinking that, because I felt like, we have to have a 4-year term for the council along with the mayor. Otherwise, for a lot of reasons. Anyway, he was sharing some perspectives, and it got me thinking that, well, why are we rushing this? Why, the work that you have done has been so incredible. Our goal from the beginning has been to provide a really clean and clear charter that is accessible to not only people in government, but to the public. And, with the mayoral term being extended all the way through to 2017, why don't we just, push that off so that we have the opportunity to really study what best practices are, what other cities our size in Connecticut are doing around, that 4-year term. And if it is prudent for both the council and the mayor to have that 4-year term. So that's just what I was thinking. I wanted to throw that out there, for your thoughts, and see where we're at with that.
Councilmember Smith, are you posing a specific question to Attorney Megnick, or?
Yeah, I think it's worth a discussion here, and I don't want to come out and say, I'm making a recommendation that we put off. I think it deserved some discussion, and that's a decision for everyone to make together, and for the commission to take along with them.
Okay. Why don't we take commentary? I see Councilmember Nora Nadelski-Eichner and Councilmember Ed Camacho. Why don't we take their comments, or whether it's directly related to Councilmember Smith's comments or not? Nora, you're up first, and then followed by Ed.
Thank you very much, President Burnett. And Barbara, thank you very much, or Councilmember Smith, thank you very much for raising this. I think that you're right that this is a good conversation to have publicly and really think about. You know, I see pros and cons in moving the council to a 4-year term, and I'm glad that it's in some ways that it's not on the agenda at the moment as a recommendation from the commission, because I do think we really need more time to think it through. That said, I also see the imbalance in, you know, making a decision on one position before we've made a decision on the other position. And it is tricky, right? I think that there's something very nice in some ways about the council being up every 2 years. It gives, you know, new people time or, you know, an opportunity to jump in. I think it makes recruitment easier. It's hard to commit for 4 years to what is an extremely labor intensive job for, as people have said, basically nothing, no compensation. And, you know, I do wonder about its impact on our recruitment efforts if we are looking, you know, people are staring 4 years in the face. On the other hand, I worry enormously about what a off-cycle election would look like if only council members are on the ballot. We know that voter turnout in municipal elections is already quite low. And, you know, if we don't have a mayoral race sort of heading up that ballot, I worry enormously that we're going to sort of get lost in the shuffle and people are not going to be paying enough attention. And we have the possibility that a very important role for the city is decided by a very small number of votes. So I'm merely agreeing with you, really, is to say that I think, you know, I want the public to hear that we are thinking about these issues. There's been a lot, I think everyone who sits in this seat are thinking about them and seeing the pros and cons and trying to weigh, you know, the various things we'll have to decide. And I do think it's worth kind of noting to the commission as you all consider what to do this year, that are some real pros and cons in each direction. And I'm very interested to hear the commission's thoughts in that regard as we go forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Ed Camacho.
Thank you, President Burnett. So I tend to agree with Councilmember Smith. I think that what we're attempting here, what we're doing is we're doing an entire rewrite of the charter, which needed to be done, and I think that that's the important part of this entire thing. And I think that there's been a lot of discussion about having the 4-year mayor item as a question, as a standalone, or just basically be a part of the entire charter question. And I think there's been enough debate about that, or at least enough discussion about whether or not it's a doomed to fail, if it's a standalone, and whether or not it becomes a poison pill if it's part of the one question about the charter. And there's also the issue of having a council election in an off year, which creates some difficulty as well as the discussion about having the common council be a 4-year term. And I also agree that becomes a problem when you don't have compensation as part of the issue or as part of the question, because then you're going to have someone looking at a 4-year term without really with a lot of work and not much compensation, which I agree will, I think, adversely impact recruitment efforts. So I tend to think that the better part of valor is to keep the eye on the prize, look at the big picture, and quite frankly, not consider a 4-year mayor term as part of this charter revision, and pick up that issue sometime down the road when we look at this charter every 2 years, from here on out. Because then at that point, we can address all those questions that remain outstanding. And I think that we don't create an issue with a passage of this charter revision, which is really the most important part of this exercise. And I think the 4-year mayor term sort of complicates that. And I don't think it's the gain is worth the potential for confusion or for difficulties with respect to passing the charter.
Thank you, Councilmember Camacho. I see Councilmember Nicole Ayers, who has not had an opportunity to speak yet. So Councilmember Nicole Ayers, followed by Councilmember Barbara Smith.
Thank you. I just want to add to the conversation. Several of my colleagues prior to me stated that they want to maybe hold off or wait to decide on term limits. But I think the council has to do some work before we can even discuss term limits. I think we're all in agreement when we're saying that compensation is a barrier or connected to term limits. So if this council or the council afterwards is serious in thinking about adding term limits, they first have to address the issue of compensation. One is not separate from the other. I think if we really are serious about this, we need to address the issue of compensation and then come and address the issue of term limits. It's not one or the other. And me personally, when you're talking about extending the term of the mayor or the common council, I do understand the concerns about low turnout, but no disrespect to our current mayor, the mayor gets paid. And some people may argue he gets paid well. Some people may say he doesn't get paid enough for the job that he does for our city, but he does get paid. So I really think that this council, this August body, needs to be very honest with themselves and say, if you think that you are in a position to agree with the increase of term limits for the council, then you first need to do your due diligence and either it go through ordinance or however the process is going to be, and address the elephant in the room, which is compensation. And I would like to say in this public arena that you can look at compensation in many ways, in many creative ways. It's just not a stipend that you're giving people. We use our own personal phone. It doesn't cost money, or it doesn't cost that money to get us a Google number. We could still use our own phone, but we're doing it through a Google number without people using their personal phone, or to make provision for childcare, or to give us mileage. There's a gamut of different ways that we can address compensation. So I would urge my colleagues that let's deal with that before you think about extending term limits.
Councilmember Barbara Smith.
Thank you, President Burnett. I just wanted to thank council members Nadjelski, Eichner, and Camacho for your comments and helping me to clarify, my thoughts on this. I do think it's prudent that we hold off on the 4-year mayoral term. I think after the election, what's really important is to right away get an ad hoc committee of the Common Council together to start this work. And then, ultimately, set up that Charter Revision Commission that will continue the work within, by the end of 2 years. But this just requires really careful study, I think. And it deserves the time to do that. And again, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The work that the commission has done is so important. We've got to get this passed. We've got to get the word out to the voters. We've got to have, clear messaging because this is what's important, is this work that you have done. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's clear that this is a first and very key lap in a very long race. But it's important to get off to a good start. And I think that has been the mission of this council, to get off to a good start. We started with having a super great Charter Revision Commission to get us off in the right direction. And we can't address every single item between now and November. But I think it's key that we identify the key priority items. And as was stated, the role of the next council is to take the baton and continue the momentum in terms of, as Councilmember Smith indicated, putting together an ad hoc committee and having council members really dig in even further into the key items that need to be addressed, and then work collaboratively with the current or the next Charter Revision Commission to bring us to the next level of revisions that will come forward. So just want to make it clear to the public and those that are on this call, this is not the first and only attempt to make the charter modified and the necessary adjustments. It's just the beginning, but we have to get off to a good start. And I think we're heading in that direction. Councilmember Jim Freyer, I saw your hand up. Is it still up for a commentary?
No, it's not. It's no longer up. I was just going to second exactly what you just so eloquently put forward. So nothing further.
Great. Councilmember Jen McMurray.
I never felt strongly one way or the other about the 4-year mayor term. I felt strongly that council shouldn't be for all the reasons mentioned. And I always thought if we did move forward with this, it should be a separate line item because of the work you guys have all put into this. And I didn't want to tank that. But I do think it's really important. And one of the suggestions I had made was that we revisit this charter sooner rather than later after these revisions are made. And so I had suggested we meet again in 2 years, not the proposed 5 years, at least for this next round, because there are a lot of big questions, as noted by the public, as noted by the council, as noted by the commission, that we really do need to tackle about how we govern and how we work as a government in this city. I think there's a lot of things that are broken and not working effectively. And so I agree with everything everybody has said here. We really do need to start that ad hoc committee right away. I'm totally fine with not tackling the mayor term right now. I think that's probably very prudent. Let's get this over the finish line and let's then focus on the work at hand for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Josh Goldstein.
Thank you, President Burnett. I think the one thing that a point that I think is worth noting, I think 2 points. One, as my colleagues have said, I think it can serve as a distraction, but I think the part that actually makes this hardest is that built into the proposal was the fact that the 4-year term wouldn't have taken effect for another 4 to 5 years, which is actually, I mean, like, it's not the easiest thing to explain to people in the world to say we're implementing this provision and it's not going to happen for another 5 years. So I think that holding off and not doing the 4-year term this time actually makes sense, if for no other reason than that's essentially what we were planning to do anyway. However, I think that there is, we're saying, oh, we're going to kick the can down the road and we're going to take on a lot of these harder questions in a couple of years, which we should. And I hope that in a couple of years, or as soon as the ad hoc committee is formed, that we are actually going to be willing to take on a lot of these substantive concerns. Because to be honest, I feel like we could come up with arguments in 2 years for us to want to kick the can down the road again. And that I am simply not for. There's too much good work that needs to happen. And we need to not be afraid to make the changes we need to make to secure the strength of our government for the future. And so long as we are committed to actually doing the work past this first, hopefully assuming this passes first vote, then I think it is a prudent decision to hold off on the 4-year term. Because as we've said, the job from day one is to make sure that this is a cleaner, easier to read, easily organized document, which it undoubtedly is. So I just want to make sure, and I commit here in a public meeting to make sure that we actually stick to what we're saying tonight. And really get down to work once this passes, hopefully in November. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is great dialogue with our Charter Revision Commission on the meeting with us. And there, I think it's clear that they're hearing the spirit of the council as it relates to the 4-year term. Councilmember Nora Jelski-Eichner, I think you had your hand up.
I did, just to briefly say that I'm saying what I already said about the balance of the council and the mayor, and I continue to be concerned about that. I do also want to say that I see the logic in wanting to make the change of the mayor's term so far out that it is very clear that it is not intended to benefit anyone in particular. And that I do think that is the one advantage of doing it now as opposed to in 2 years. I really appreciate what the commission did with that long lead time. So I would just want to make clear that I'm not sure that I'm saying necessarily one way or the other on the mayor term, so much as I'm saying that I do think the council term probably needs to adjust, in my opinion, to go with the mayor term. It's a complex issue, and I appreciate the commission wrestling with it.
Are there any other comments or questions? Mayor Riley.
Thank you. I did have a conversation with co-chairperson Rick McQuaid the other day, and I think with Mr. Burnett today. And I said, this really right now should be removed because it's distracting from all the other things. And it's time to move this forward. And if there's any fear that the item of a 4-year term for mayor will interfere or run the risk of having the voters reject the rest of the hard work that's been done, I think that this should be moved or removed and brought up at another time if appropriate. We also, have talked about the idea behind this initial process was pretty much just to clean the charter up. No substantive issues, and certainly a 4-year term for mayor is a substantive issue. So I think it's time to back off from that, but it's just my recommendation to the council. The final decision is for the council, but I think there's enough comment and on that tonight that suggests that it's the right thing to do. And as I said, I had a conversation with Mr. Burnett today and with Mr. McQuaid over the weekend, and I told him the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess at this point, another hand, Councilmember David Hooverman.
Thank you, President Burnett. I may be very much in a minority here. I happen to applaud the commission for putting forth the idea of of a 4-year term for mayor. Something that happens all too often with the 2-year cycle is that we start to get the comment that is made that you're constantly running, and that you're put in a position where you have to be thinking about running for the next term. And I have always been troubled by that, because from an executive standpoint, my question is how can you get started on anything in 2 years when the second year is about thinking about the next election cycle? Maybe with the municipal, it's cut down to 6 or 7 months of that last part of the term. But it is a definite consideration, and it's something that's a reality within our political structure. So I applauded the commission for taking this up. I also think that the way that we have been talking about it, that to make it a separate item that the voters have an opportunity to weigh in on separately from the what we're trying to do with the errata and the Scrivener's issues and the structure of the charter itself, to turn it into a living, readable document so that we can easily find things, we can easily reference things, and we can also look at then the substantive part in preceding years. My colleagues who have talked about, sooner, had to have another commission sooner rather than later, 2 years as opposed to 5 years, I fully agree with, because I think that starting to get into some of the substantive issues becomes important at that point. But I think I feel strongly that there's a little bit of just pushing something down the road this way that I think is important, because I think as the city grows, I think that some stability within that executive branch is important. But I also realize a lot of the other issues that surround this, as we talked about, putting the council then on a 2-year cycle as opposed to a 4-year cycle, and how that works with voter turnout. And these are real realities. So I'm glad that we're talking about it. My fear is that if we continue to push it down the road, we're never going to find a solution that works for the city. So for me, I'm in favor of it being a part of this resolution, and being then, when we talk about crafting the language for this, we would be talking about that as a separate item.
Thank you. Chair of the Charter Revision Commission, Patsy Brusher. Patsy, you're still on mute if you're looking to speak.
Oh,
Here you go.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, President. I wanted to just articulate for the council how much I think the rest of the commission, as well as myself, appreciate this discussion that you're having on this subject of a 4-year term, because we had similar, almost identical back and forth discussions, and there was no clear way of making it all happen at once and protect or have the opportunity to test how something like this could work for our city. But there was the strongest argument about eventually that this is a very important part of good administration for a city of our size, to have a 4-year term for the mayor and potentially also the council. So we will be happy to respond to all of your thoughts when we meet on this coming Wednesday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Charter Revision Commission member Carl Dickens.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to throw a couple of things in as for my clarification also, is that the discussion of a 4-year term is not a term limit. So, and Councilman Hugelman, I think, laid out some really good points there, which are the ones we really keyed in on. Number one was about how long it takes to get things done. And, hardly anything can get done in 2 years. But I've been listening to the conversation intently, and there's, kind of interchangeably term limit and term. It's not a limit. It's a term. It's a 4-year term. And for all the reasons as stated when we talked about the council, the same kind of conversations came up. And now how do you implement that in a rolling election in this? And certainly the concern by us as well was that it happened to fall in a period of time where voter turnout could be very small. That would be a major concern. And that was our concern as well. So I just want to enhance a couple of those points. And Attorney Mednick, if I'm saying anything wrong, please jump in and correct me.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barbara Smith.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to clarify. I do support a 4-year term for the mayor. I think for me, the reason this really came up is feeling so strongly about additionally the 4-year term for the council as well, and that together makes me think that we need much more study on the two together. So I just want to throw that out.
Okay, bringing us back to, let's see, Councilmember David Hoofman.
Thank you, President Burnett. I just want to key off of something that Commission member Mr. Dickens brought up, which is the term limit. And I know it was brought up within public comment, and I'm I am not opposed, or I'm sorry, I'm not in favor of term limits, and I have never been in favor of term limits. I think that the reality to me is we have term limits, which is voting and it's engagement, and I think that that's what's most important. And I'm glad that it was not something that was brought forth within this particular revision. I know somewhere down the road it may come up and may be a part. I don't know if you, as the commission, had a discussion about term limits. I don't recall anything from any of the notes that I read or the discussions that we did have. But I know that for me, term limits are something that I steer very far away from. As far as support, so.
I thank you. I see Charter Revision Commission member Carl Dickens, followed by Attorney Steve Mednick.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I'm going to do is defer to Mr. Mednick to answer Councilman Uelman's question about term limits. If I remember right, it's been a while ago, but if I remember right, as a charter, we don't have the right to set term limits. That can only be done by the state and state legislature. So that came off the table. I can't tell you how many times my phone rang while I was sitting on the commission from certain people saying, term limits, you got to get term limits. We can't do that in the charter. Am I right, Steve?
I agree with Attorney Dickens.
Thank you, sir.
I have no further comment, Mr. President.
Thank you, Attorney Mednick. So as we look, before we move to a motion to address the charter revision, the resolution that's before us, are there any specific other than the 4-year term limits, which I think we've clearly communicated? Are there any other comments or questions related to the specific items that Attorney Mednick initially walked us through, that we as a council will be sending forward to the Charter Revision Commission? And I see Councilmember Nora Nadjelski-Eichner, followed by Councilmember David Hooverman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unless anyone has any questions on specific things that I've flagged, I don't need to go over them, but I did want to jump on item 21, which is the voting standards for the council. In case anyone's not clear on what this means, there are any number of places in the charter where the council needs to vote by a majority, or it needs to vote by 2/3, or it needs to vote by X, Y, or Z. And the question is, I think the primary question for us to resolve is whether those should be consistent, meaning that in all cases, majority or 2/3 are then of the same amount, which is either the number of members present and voting or the total number of members of the body. Because it's in all different ways across the charter right now. My personal recommendation would be that it should in all cases be of the members present and voting. That prohibits strange things happening where someone's unavailable or someone deliberately chooses to make themselves unavailable. So I think we could avoid a lot of risk and damage, and also still respect the fact that on important votes, the members will show up, everyone will be here. So I think present and voting would be the correct standard, and I would recommend we adopt it in all cases. But I just want to get that out there in case other people had other thoughts, because I do think it's something that we as a council should comment on, given the importance to us and how we function.
Thank you. Councilmember David Hooverman, and Attorney Mednick, and then Councilmember Ed Camacho.
Well, I guess my question is on the heels of what Councilperson Nadjelski-Eichner just brought up, is what that standard is, and that we're leaving here tonight with making a determination of what that standard is. I guess the question that I have is, when we get into situations where we need the supermajority, where it's you know, an issue of relevance and importance that we want a supermajority. Again, is it a supermajority of the people present or a supermajority of the council itself? And that's a big question that I have when I read back through the different areas and the different places where it is, you know, has change of verbiage. And so that's the question that I have. Are there places where it's more important to make it the supermajority of the body, or is it more important for it to be a supermajority of the voting members present at that time?
To address your question, we're not going to resolve this item tonight. This is an outstanding item that will have further dialogue between the council as well as the Charter Revision Commission. We will need to resolve it, but we are not going to resolve it tonight. So that stands as an outstanding item.
Then I think we should have a robust debate about it tonight, because this is something we have pushed down the line a few times. We've touched on it and not discussed it. So that's what I'm bringing up. If Councilmember Ed Camacho allows me, I'd like Attorney Mednick to comment, and then Councilmember Ed Camacho.
Thank you. And my point is not a debate point. It's just a technical point. In the proposed charter, the standard definition is the definition that Councilmember Najelski Eichner favors as the general standard, and it's and present in voting is a general approach that you can take. The point I've been trying to make for the last few weeks is that you have a number of other instances. In the overwhelming majority, it probably should be the defined term. Otherwise, it shouldn't be a defined term. We should probably have a standard that you use throughout the charter, except where you don't want to use it. And what I was going to recommend to the commission, Mr. President, on Wednesday evening, is that they coordinate with you an evening in the next couple of weeks where we sit down with this, as many of your colleagues as you want could be there, and we have a robust discussion to try to, and what I'll do is I'll draw up the list. So you don't have to go through the charter. There will be a list so everybody can see what the different items are that are in the charter that deal with voting standards, because there are some that should be 2/3. There are some that should have different voting standards, but the commission is going to have to tackle it. But in order to make sure that we get something over to you that is acceptable to the majority of the council in August, I think that there needs to be a session where the commission sits with members of the council in the next couple of weeks to try to go through this in some detail. That's all I wanted to point out from a
Right.
point of view.
Thank you, Attorney Mednick, and those meetings will take place. Councilmember Ed Camacho.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what Attorney Mednick said is, I guess, covers pretty much what I was going to say. I mean, I think that that as a general rule, the president voting language should be, accepted throughout the charter. But there are certain items like removal of a mayor. You don't want that to be governed by a president voting. So I think we need to be careful about, in those instances in the charter where it refers to 2/3 of the membership, that we should look at that provision to make sure that it is the type of thing that actually requires or should require a 2/3 of the entire membership vote, as opposed to a majority of the people of the council members present and voting. So I think that it's good that Attorney Mednick is going to provide that list to us, because I think that the general language certainly cannot possibly apply to removal of the mayor, as an example.
Thank you. Again, I'll circle back. Are there any other specific comments related to the various items in the resolution before we call for a motion to approve this resolution list and forward it on to the Charter Revision Commission?
Motion.
Well, I was asking for questions and
Sorry.
comments first. Thank you. Okay, I guess hearing and seeing none. We are at the point of a motion to approve the resolution with the recommended charter revision recommendations pursuant to CGS 7-191B. I believe I stated that correctly, Attorney Mednick. So that is the motion that's before you. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor show by a sign of aye, either verbally or raising your hand. Actually, what I would ask is Irene Dixon, Irene, if you can do a roll call vote of those that are present, so we have it for the record.
Absolutely. Okay, Mr. Burnett,
Yes.
Mr. Camacho,
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein,
Yes.
Ms. Najolski Eichner,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers, Mr. Uvelman,
Aye.
Ms. Reveluz,
Yes.
Ms. McMurr,
Yes.
and Mr. Frayer.
Yes.
We have unanimous 10
Great. Thank you very
votes
much.
for yes, yes.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the council members as well as the Charter Revision Commission. And again, this just moves us to another phase. The next meeting will take place on Wednesday, the 19th. That will be chaired by the Charter Revision Commission, along with members of the council to move further into the detail of these resolution items for further vetting and discussion. So again, several more meetings to come as we get closer to preparing the actual question for the ballot in November. With that, back to you, Mr. Mayor, for adjournment.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett, and thank you to everybody for your really appropriate and conversation. It's been very interesting. So with that, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. You know, I'm here for that.
Ms. Revolus makes a motion to adjourn. It is 8:49. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned.